If the Islamic Republic of Iran says, we want to have negotiations, let's talk, that's the time you think, oh, let's step up the bombings. Why? Because Islamic law teaches that there are only two conditions under which an infidel force and a Muslim force should make a truce. The first condition is when the infidels are about to convert to Islam. The second condition is the key one, and that is if the Islamic force is losing and needs time to gather strength to fight more effectively. So when the Islamic Republic of Iran says we want a truce, that means we're losing, and we know it. I've been asked to speak about Iran and is peace possible? So we can make this quick. No. Thanks very much. It's been great. No, seriously, the Islamic Republic of Iran will never make peace with the United States. That is not to say that Iran will never make peace with the United States, but the Islamic Republic of Iran will never make peace with the United States as long as it continues to exist. And as a matter of fact, in the event that the Islamic Republic of Iran asks for peace, that is the time to press forward and fight all the more strongly against it. And there is a very important reason for that. The Islamic Republic of Iran is exactly what it says. It's an Islamic republic. It is based on Islam. Every explanation it has ever offered for why it hates the United States and why it hates Israel is based on Islam. And yet, every communication out of Washington about Iran since 1979 and the beginning of the Islamic Republic, there has been never a single mention of Islam. In other words, the U.S. State Department, under Republican and Democrat administrations, has consistently and continuously ignored the primary key to understanding what the Islamic Republic of Iran is all about and what it wants to do. And that is a grave and serious omission that has cost us a great deal and will continue to do so. So I'll tell you, in the first place, if the Islamic Republic of Iran says, we want to have negotiations, let's talk, that's the time you think, oh, let's step up the bombings. Why? Because we're big bad imperialist colonialists? No. Because Islamic law teaches that there are only two conditions under which an infidel force and a Muslim force should make a truce. The first condition is when the infidels are about to convert to Islam. Now, that's a whole other talk we could have, but right now that's not on the horizon for the United States. The second condition is the key one, and that is if the Islamic force is losing and needs time to gather strength to fight more effectively. That's when they say, hey, yeah, let's have a truce. So when the Islamic Republic of Iran says we want a truce, that means we're losing and we know it. And so we want time. So that's the last time we should be saying, oh, they want peace. We'll sign a paper like after World War II and we'll be friends. Never happened. All they're going to do is use the time that they gain by making the agreement to build up their forces to fight us again later. So that's the last thing that we should do is make peace when they say let's make peace. So that's the first mistake that we have made again and again and again. Another one is believing that we can make a deal with these people at all. Now why? Because the Islamic Republic of Iran is a Shiite government. Shiite Islam is the guiding force, the principle, the foundation, the structure on which everything the Islamic Republic of Iran does is based. Shiite Islam. Shiites are about 15% of Muslims around the world, but they are officially 99% of the Muslims in Iran. 99% of the people in Iran are Shiites, at least officially. In reality, many of them are so disgusted with the Islamic Republic that they've left Islam altogether. But officially, they're 99%. And the government is a Shiite government. Now, why does this matter? Because the Shiites invented the concept known as taqiyya, which you may have heard of. It became very popular. It became very widely known after 9/11, which is concealment. As a matter of fact, it's a kind of hat. If you want to conceal your bald spot, you wear a taqiyya. But it's also concealment of the truth because the Shiites are a minority among the Muslims and the Sunnis were always killing them. Islam has a death penalty for heresy and apostasy. So you have one sect, the Sunnis, the other sect, the Shiites. They both think the others are heretics and apostates, and so they kill each other. But there are many more Sunnis than there are Shiites, so Shiites end up getting killed a lot. So they developed this idea, which is actually based on the Quran, the holy book of Islam, that teaches that you can pretend to be on the side of your enemies in order to gain an advantage over them. And so a Shiite, in fear for his life from the Sunnis, would say, hey, you got it wrong, I'm a Sunni, and save his life. And so the Islamic Republic of Iran may say, we don't want a nuclear weapon, we just want nuclear power for peaceful purposes. We don't want to do this or that. We are your friends, and they will pretend to be on the side of their enemies. This is a deeply rooted concept in Islam in general, because as I said, it's in the Quran. Chapter 3, verse 28. You can open your Quran right now, and you'll see. Chapter 3, verse 28 says, do not take the unbelievers as your friends and protectors in preference to believers. Whoever does this has nothing to do with Allah, unless you're doing it to guard yourselves against them. And some of the leading commentators, the Islamic scholars who explain the Quran for Muslims, they say this means we smile in the faces of some people, but behind their backs we curse them. Should you make a deal with people who will smile in your face and curse you behind your back? Probably not prudent. So you've got several reasons why it is unwise to make a deal with the Islamic Republic of Iran. There's much more. The Islamic Republic of Iran is the only country in the world where in their parliament, on a routine basis, they call for the destruction of other countries. Imagine if the U.S. senators stood up and started shouting, death to Iran. Can you imagine the outcry, the worldwide indignation, the condemnations at the United Nations? And of course, it's inconceivable that such a thing would ever happen, nor should it happen. But in the Islamic Republic of Iran, on a pretty routine basis, they stand up and they scream, death to America, death to Israel. And in the mosques every Friday, you know that Friday is the big day of prayer for the Muslims. Of course, there are 5 daily prayers that the Islamic law mandates that you do, but not everybody does. But at noon on Friday, there's the sermon in the mosque, and it's the big day for communal worship. So more people go to the mosque on Friday noon than any other time during the week, and they hear the sermon. And the Islamic Republic of Iran orders the people of Iran, when they go for Friday noon prayers, to chant death to America and death to Israel in the mosques. You know, just like when you go to church and chant death to Iran. I mean, it's so absurd, but that is exactly what it is that they're doing. And it must be borne in mind that this is not just some show of braggadocio or defiance or something like that. The late Ayatollah Khamenei, not the Ayatollah Khamenei they got now, but the last one, the one they got now, they might not even have now. Nobody's seen him since he became the supreme leader. He may be dead, who knows? But they used to have one, his dad, who we would see quite often. And he said at one point, actually he said it more than once, that death to America is not just a slogan. Death to America is a policy. Death to America is the goal of our entire regime. Death to America is the goal of their entire regime, and we're going to go and make a deal and think that everything is going to be all right and they're going to rejoin the family of nations. And there are reasons why death to America is the goal of the entire regime. The Islamic Republic of Iran, remember, as I said at the beginning, is an Islamic republic. And that means everything that it does is based on Islam. And they think that Islam, of course, being the one true religion of the one true God, that it offers the one true vision for the perfect society on earth. And one of the main principles of that idea is the concept of the rule of the cleric, velayat-e faqih, the rule of the cleric. The idea is that Muhammad, the prophet of Islam, was in a certain sense he was a very real sense a religious leader, because he got messages from Allah and they were collected into the Quran, but he was also a military and a political leader. And so the perfect Islamic society, according to the founder of the Islamic Republic, the Ayatollah Khomeini, not Khamenei, Khomeini, the guy who, you remember him from 1979 when they deposed the Shah and put him into power, he formulated this idea that because Muhammad was the ruler of the first Muslim community, the rightful ruler of the Muslim community were the Muslim clerics. And so that is the perfect government that Allah ordains for the earth, and it's embodied in the government of the Islamic Republic of Iran. And the Islamic Republic of Iran imposes Sharia, which is Islamic law. Islamic law is not like American law. Islamic law comes from Allah. It is based on the Quran, the holy book of Islam, and the Sunnah, which is the accepted practice that is derived from the words and deeds of Muhammad the Prophet. So it is a perfect law that Allah has given to the world. And you want to have a perfect society, you implement Sharia. So you have the perfect ruler that God ordains and the perfect society. There is no questioning in such an arrangement because, well, it's like the Ten Commandments. If I said, I don't really like that stealing commandment because I like to steal stuff. Could we throw that one out? Could we take a vote? Anybody here against the stealing commandment? We'll throw it out. Doesn't work that way. It's the law of God. It's not negotiable. So it's the same thing with Sharia, except Sharia covers every aspect of life, including the political realm. And it's all the law of God that is immutable, perfect, unchangeable. Now, what is the chief competitor to that vision? The United States of America. Because the United States of America is based on the idea that Thomas Jefferson enunciated in the Declaration of Independence. The government derives its just powers from the consent of the governed. That idea is fundamentally opposed to the governing idea of the Islamic Republic of Iran, you see? Because if the government derives its just powers from the consent of the governed, then we can change the government. We can throw them out and put in different people. We can change the laws. But if you believe that your laws were given from on high and they're perfect because they come from the one only true God, then there's no voting. There's no consent of the governed. The consent of the governed doesn't matter one bit. You just have to accept what Allah ordains. And so we have two fundamentally opposed visions of how a human society should work. It's either based on the consent of the governed or it's based on the will of Allah. But it can't be both. And so when the rulers of the Islamic Republic look out on the world, they wanted to export their revolution. They still do. The Ayatollah Khomeini and Khamenei both spoke about this frequently, that the Islamic Revolution of 1979 in Iran was just the precursor, and that their vision, their mission was to export the Islamic Revolution all over the world. And what would they run into when they did that? The idea that the government derives its just powers from the consent of the governed. And so the United States was the fundamental obstacle to the Islamic Republic of Iran's grand vision for the world. And that's why Death to America. They're not just chanting death to America because we're the big kid on the block and they want to depose us. It's much bigger than that. The Islamic Revolution, if it really comes from Allah and Allah is real and Sharia is really his law, well, then the whole world has to accept it without any exceptions. And this is the reason why the Islamic Republic of Iran engaged in so much global adventurism, because it had a mission from God. And we were the fundamental stumbling block to the fulfillment of that mission. And then there's death to Israel. What's the deal with Israel? It's the strangest conflict because, nowadays, of course, support for Israel has become very controversial in the United States. And there are many people, even on the right, even among patriots, who say that the United States should not have an alliance with Israel. And nobody ever seems to stop and ask, wait a minute, why does the Islamic Republic of Iran hate Israel? What did Israel do to the Islamic Republic of Iran? And the answer to that is nothing at all. They do not share a border. They do not have competing territorial claims. They do not compete in the economic realm like Israel and the Islamic Republic of Iran both produce the same thing and they're both trying to sell it. Nothing like that is happening. So what on earth explains this tremendous antagonism? Once again, I said at the beginning that the Islamic Republic of Iran explains everything it does, by means of reference to Islam. And in the State Department and all over official Washington, through Republican and Democrat administrations, the one thing they ignore when dealing with Iran is Islam. But if you really want to understand what Iran is all about, it's all about Islam. Why do they hate Israel? It's all about Islam. Because the Quran you can turn now to chapter 2, verse 191, and it says, drive them out from where they drove you out. Drive them out from where they drove you out. So, what is Israel? Israel is a state of people who were the indigenous people of the land who were exiled from the land, with some exceptions. There were some who stayed there all the way through, and who returned to the land in 1948. Who ruled the land in between? Well, the Romans did, and then the Eastern Roman Empire, the Byzantines, and then who? The Arab Muslims, and then the Turkish Muslims. And so it was Muslim land. Have you ever noticed that a lot of the flags of Islamic countries are green? You know why? It's not just that they're Packers fans. It is actually because green is the color of springtime, and springtime is the time of growth. And Islam is always growing. There is no fall, there is no winter, it is always spring. Islam must dominate and not be dominated, said Muhammad. And it's always expanding. So what happened in Israel? Land that was Muslim, that was ruled by Sharia, was retaken by non-Muslims. And not only just any non-Muslims, but the Jews. And the Jews, in the Quran, chapter 5, verse 82, you can look it up, chapter 5, verse 82, it says, you will find that the most vehement in hostility to the believers are the Jews. In other words, who hates you the most? Muslims? The Jews do. So, they're the worst enemies of the Muslims, and they took this land back, and the Quran says, drive them out from where they drove you out. That's as much of a commandment in Islam as thou shalt not steal is in Judaism and Christianity. So, they have a divine command to drive out from any land that they have lost the people who have taken it, and to retake it for Islam. And that's why you will see, if you read the communiques of Al-Qaeda and ISIS and all the other jihad groups around the world, they will talk about Israel and how Israel has to be destroyed, but they'll also talk about Spain, because Spain is another land that was ruled by Islam and is not today. And so it's right there, number 2 on the to-do list. Israel has to be destroyed because the Quran commands that any infidels who have retaken Islamic land have to be driven out. So what happens if they don't get driven out? Well, it's a tremendous rebuke to Islam and to Allah that he says, drive them out from where they drove you out, and the Muslims haven't managed to do so. It's a tremendous humiliation, you see. And humiliation is the worst thing that you could inflict, because Islam must dominate and not be dominated. And because the Quran says in chapter 9, verse 29, fight even the people of the book, that's Jews and Christians, until they pay the jizya with willing submission and feel themselves subdued or humbled. That is, the non-Muslims have to be humiliated and the Muslims exalted, because the Quran in many places promises that the believers will prosper and be blessed in this world as well as the next, and the unbelievers will suffer in this world as well as the next. And so the unbelievers have to be humiliated. It's another divine command. And if the state of Israel, even if it were the size of a postage stamp, even if it gave up all the land that it controls except for a tiny little bit, there would still be Muslims who think, well, we have to drive them out from all of it. And the existence of Israel is a humiliation. It is a rebuke to Islam. It's showing that Islam is not victorious, and Allah promised victory in this world as well as the next. So America has to be destroyed and Israel has to be destroyed. These are maximalist visions. There is no compromising on them because they're based on divine commands. America has to be destroyed so that the Islamic revolution can be spread throughout the world, and Israel has to be destroyed in accord with the divine command to regain all land that was lost. Any land that was ruled at one point under Islam belongs by right to the Muslims forever. So the Islamic Republic of Iran is never going to be friendly to the West. And there is no accord that could ever be formulated that could make it possible for the Islamic Republic of Iran to coexist peacefully with the world. It'll never happen. And as long as that regime exists, then it will be continuing to make war to try to realize its great goals of death to America and death to Israel. The Islamic Republic of Iran has to therefore be the one that suffers its own demise. But this is the great problem that we face today. Because historically, you look at every conflict in world history, there has never been, now maybe somebody can correct me on this, but I really don't think so, there has never been a an aggressive party that was conquered from the air alone, from bombing alone. There had to be ground forces going in. Now, am I advocating that the United States send ground forces into Iran? Absolutely not. But I do want to talk about the whole idea that regime change is some terrible thing that we should shy away from, which is something that many popular commentators have convinced many people of in the last year or so, that, oh no, regime change is terrible, and they base it on Iraq and Afghanistan and the tremendous failures that the United States suffered in both countries. George W. Bush said, we're going to make them a light unto the Muslim world. We're going to make them Western-style democracies that will spread the idea that the governments derive their just powers from the consent of the governed all over the Islamic world, and there will be peace. And they drastically underestimated the allegiance that people had for Sharia, for Islamic law, considering it to be the law of the perfect God, the only God. So in Iraq, Saddam Hussein was toppled, and he was a secular ruler. He was a terrible tyrant, and he tortured people and put people in filing cabinets and terrible things. And I'm not defending him in the slightest degree, but he was a secular ruler. He did not rule according to Islamic law. There were many people in Iraq who thought, this is not legitimate. We have to have Islamic law. And so they were glad to see him go. And when we had the voting in Iraq, in the first place, the Shiites won because they are a majority in Iraq. It's one of the only other countries besides Iran where they have a majority. And the Sunnis, not wanting to accept either Shiite rule or secular rule, revolted in the northern part of the country, and they started to form jihad groups like ISIS to establish Islamic law, because they believe that that's the will of Allah for governments. And so we had ISIS and its caliphate in Iraq and Syria, and all the other jihad groups. One of them has now taken over Syria. And all of that comes from the toppling of Saddam Hussein. So that was a disaster. And then we have Afghanistan, where we toppled the Taliban, and the Taliban waited for 20 years and then came back into power because the people love the Taliban, and they love it because they're Muslims. The Taliban are Muslims. They want Islamic law. The Taliban gives them Islamic law. We're kidding ourselves if we think that's an unpopular regime. If it had been an unpopular regime, opposition to it would have formed while we were there that would have prevented the Taliban from returning to power. Never happened. In Iran, it's a very different situation. People act as if because this happened in Iraq and Afghanistan, therefore something like that would happen in Iran. That's not the case at all. It's a completely different situation. In Iraq and in Afghanistan, both countries wanted Sharia, and the Bush administration, the Obama administration, both drastically underestimated the allegiance of the people to Sharia and their unwillingness to accept a Western-style republic. In Iran, they had a Western-style society. It was not a free republic, but it was a very secular, Western-oriented government under the Shah. And, of course, the Shah was toppled. But now they've had 47 years of Islamic rule. And there was a survey taken, a very extensive and carefully calibrated survey that was taken a few years back in 2020 of Iranians, and only 40% still identify as Muslim at all, because they're so disgusted after 47 years of Islamic rule that they don't even say they're Muslims. A lot of them have become Christians. A lot of them have gone back to the ancestral religion of Iran, Zoroastrianism. A lot of them are atheists. Officially, they're all Shiite Muslims. But in reality, no. In Iran, I'm 64 years old. I was 17 when the Shah was toppled. There are plenty of people who are 64 who are in Iran and older. And there are plenty of people who remember what it was like under the Shah, know that it was better, and want secular rule in Iran again. The crown prince, the Shah's son, is ready to come in and lead a caretaker government. So you have a drastically different situation from what you had in Iraq and Afghanistan. The people are disgusted with Sharia. They don't want Sharia. They want a government that is much more Western-oriented. They don't actually have anything against Israel or the United States. The people, that's the government that has this tremendous hostility. But that's, like I said, it's based on Islam, and the people don't necessarily share those views anymore. But it is an extraordinarily difficult problem, and I'm sorry to say I can't offer you any easy solution because there isn't one. There has been talk about arming the Kurds and sending the Kurds in as ground forces to try to topple the Islamic Republic. Erdogan, the president of Turkey, has nixed that, and he is an ally of the United States, supposedly, and a member of NATO. And so he doesn't want the Kurds armed because he's making war on the Kurds on the other side and doesn't want to have them fighting back. So right now, it's extremely difficult. The Iranian people are kind of the poster child for not having gun control because the regime they hate has all the guns and they don't have any. And so they're helpless, essentially. You know, people say, well, why don't they rise up and topple the regime? Well, the regime has all the guns. So it's a good object lesson to not allowing the destruction of the Second Amendment in the United States. But in any case, right now, that is the very great conundrum that we face. But we should all be hoping and working toward compelling the United States government to be doing everything it can, short of sending ground forces of our own, to topple the Islamic Republic. You know, I mean, I'll close with an odd thing. When I was a kid, you know, the colleges were bad. They're even worse now. But when I went through college, I had all these communist professors, and they were always talking about the CIA toppling this government and that government. And I think, where is that CIA? Can't we get them to do it now? But anyway, I hope that there is careful strategizing going on to effect exactly that end in Iran. And until the Islamic Republic meets its welcome end, there will be no peace. And so we need to be prepared for that and have a steady and sober regard for that accordingly. Thank you very much.